Hello,
Yep.
everyone. Thanks for those sticking around to the bitter end. For those that don't know me, so I'm a FinOps SME and founding account executive at OpenOps. I've been working in FinOps for around 14 years. So I've worked with hundreds of organizations, helping them build FinOps strategies that actually deliver business value. And today I'm really looking forward to sharing with you something called the 3 phases of cloud automation. And hopefully by the end of the talk, you'll have a clear idea of some of the things you can take back to your organization and start implementing immediately. So over the next 15 minutes, we'll cover 3 main topics. First, we'll look at a quick overview of cloud automation to make sure we're on the same page. Then we'll look at the different types of automation that have evolved over the years. And finally, we'll spend a bulk of the time on the exciting stuff, AI, and how that's changing the landscape of automation and what you can start doing about it today. So let's talk about the big picture. Why should we even care about cloud automation? Well, it's more than just a buzzword. At its core, automation is about 3 main things. So it's about getting things done faster, doing them more reliably, and establishing better governance over your cloud environment. So it's a shift from that more kind of slow, error-prone manual processes to a more continuous and reliable, constant, but potentially with humans in the loop. I think always humans in the loop, but we'll come back to that. So if automation is so beneficial, why is it so difficult to get right? What we've learned from working with hundreds of organizations is the biggest hurdles aren't technical, they're actually organizational. The challenge lies in answering questions like who owns this process, who will be responsible if something goes wrong. And that's it's a people problem, not a code problem. And if we drill down even further, we'll actually find it's more of a risk problem. Your entire cloud automation strategy hinges on your organization's appetite for risk. So, a large, heavily regulated financial institution will have a completely different risk tolerance to a small startup. And for a startup, letting automation run wild is actually possibly the best way to move forward. But for a bank, that would be catastrophic. And in addition, different parts of the organization will actually have different risk tolerance too. A team that's handling credit card data will be far more cautious than a team that's handling, I don't know, website templates, for example. And then you have the typical considerations like production versus non-production or revenue generating. And so all of these factors have to be considered when you start to think about your automation strategy. So then we have to start to think about what we should even automate, especially based on risk. And so what we like to think about is those 3 levels. So like a low, medium, and high risk. A low risk task might be things like TTLs to old snapshots, or medium risk could be things like right sizing resources, which has a potential but manageable impact on your services. And a high risk task would be anything that touches critical revenue generating services. So then you can also start to think about that as functional types of automation. So the goal isn't to automate everything 100% from day one. So maybe the low risk task you can absolutely automate. But then the more medium risk, you actually want semi-automation, which means having a human in the loop to provide an additional step. And this isn't about playing a blame game here. This is more about adding additional essential checks and balances. And then finally, for the high risk decisions, really, you might only want to be informed about this. You want to be able to track its process, gather all the data, and then present to a human who can make a mindful and manual decision. So now that we have the different types of automate, or the framework, now let's talk about the different types and how the journey has sort of evolved over time. What you see here is that basically, typically, most organizations start with like manual work within the cloud console. And then the first thing that you would then step up to do is use things like the cloud native tools, like auto scaling, for example. Eventually, as you get more mature, you would then start to adopt things like policy tools, which is kind of more a traditional yes/no tool, which is great for like simple binary logic, i.e., a resource is tag delete. It's going to go and delete it, but it might fall short with more complex scenarios. And that's when engineers tend to start writing custom scripts. And then finally, we have things around the low code workflow tools, which there's also examples from the cloud provider themselves, which they're often useful, but sometimes they lack the integrations with the external tools, or they struggle with the human and approval process. So again, it's a constant iteration. So now, how will AI change all of this? AI, and specifically AI agents, are fundamentally changing how we interact. They've now become, makes it incredibly more powerful for analysis. They're capable of shifting through immense volumes of data to find a needle in the haystack, which arguably provides a higher level of abstraction. Now, instead of writing complex scripts to check resource configurations, you can simply ask in natural language, show me all the non-compliant S3 buckets. So it's really kind of moving the needle on how we're doing stuff. But yet there will be a lot of remaining questions. We all know that there's hallucinations, and so how do we actually deal with that? I'll take here is around what it can actually help us do, and I think that it goes back to some of the early days of FinOps, which is like visibility and knowing the problem. You need to be able to see it to be able to try and fix it, but actually knowing the problem doesn't fix it. Actually then trying to take it on into the phases of the fix itself needs to be reliable, it needs to be auditable, it needs to be explainable, and potentially we need a new kind of interface, which is also simple enough for humans to understand, that enables us to be able to use it. And then we also need to identify the problems safely in order to fix them. In order to help that, AI, there's software standards are emerging to help this become more of a reality. We're seeing things like MCP, or Model Context Protocol from Anthropic, which allows agents to now communicate with software. So, rather than people communicating with software, now AI can talk with AI. And similarly, Google's A2A agent, these are becoming standards now, and creating a common language necessary for a whole new ecosystem of agents to work together to manage the complex environments. And David mentioned on some of this earlier, and again, some of the others have already mentioned on this type of stuff. And then it will also be able to bring us into a new wave of connecting, cloud cost control. With these new agentic capabilities, AI can connect to diverse data sources, analyze complex configurations, telemetry in your cloud environments, identify cost savings that would nearly be impossible for humans to find just manually. Imagine a world where specialized agents from different software vendors can interact with different agents to optimize your cloud spend across your entire network. So, I mean, we're talking a little bit futuristically, so maybe we'll just wind it back a little bit and talk about what we can actually do today. So we like to think about a three-phase framework for cloud automation. And anyone that's already been involved in FinOps knows around things around crawl, walk, and run. And so we can break that down in automation as well. In the crawl phase, you'd start with the basics, implementing, low-risk automations, creating tickets for compliance issues, maybe enforcing resource tagging. Tagging's been a big one we've spoken about, but that's definitely something you could use automation for. And then you can start to move into the walk phase, where you'll start to automate financial reports, create detailed cost allocation, people like Tesco has mentioned. There was very interesting talk earlier. And then into the run phase, you can start to execute, really advanced stuff. So resource deletions, right sizing, and especially with humans in the loop. We don't necessarily see a day where AI is running around enterprises making all these decisions themselves. And I think we've all agreed with that across the day. We would also recommend a hub and spoke model for rolling this out. So you create a central team. Again, those in FinOps know and understand what this, but definitely creating a central hub where you can have the repository for your automations or your code or your best practices, and then create a partner team as a pilot spoke, and then that team can then prove out the value with you. So you document your learnings with that team, build reusable components, establish clear frameworks, and then you can start building this out across multiple teams once the pilot is successful. You can start with a number of open source tools that are available today, things like Cloud Custodian for policy enforcement, or Infocross. But the key, and I think others have mentioned it, is to start small, demonstrate value, and then scale gradually. The last piece of advice I would say is keep yourself up to date. The space moves at an incredible pace. Where we were, just 6 months ago is not where we'll be in 6 months' time. I don't know if any of you have seen the latest Will Smith eating spaghetti. We're really moving at a pace. But these are some of the people that I would suggest to keep an eye on and to follow, and some of the tools to kind of experiment with. But again, the real highlight is, keep checking back. Even if you try something and you think, it's not for me, try again in 3 months' time, because it's going to be different. And that's about it. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you for those that waited around on Friday night. Happy FinOps. Thanks, Victor, for the opportunity.